We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vallotton.
Welcome back to the BraveCo podcast. Men, I'm excited for today. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and it's going to surprise you a little bit, but it's actually forgiveness and working through pain. Here's the thing, is that if I asked you right now, what's your process for dealing with pain? What would you say? You could even like pause this podcast right now and you could like take your best shot at this is my process for dealing with pain. And if I said, what's your process for forgiveness as well? What would you say to me? Now, I think forgiveness and working through pain are some of the most misunderstood things in our lives today. Most people learned forgiveness basically from their parents and from the church. And it looks a little bit like this, like we have this obligation to forgive people that have hurt us because we've been forgiven so much. And before you shut this podcast off and be like, gosh, this sounds like he's about to preach heresy, I'm not. So it is true, right? That we need to forgive just as Christ has forgiven us, right? Because we have been forgiven of so much, but we often use forgiveness as this blanket that we throw over our whole entire life, right? So this happens a lot. I see it in the church a lot. Someone gets saved. Part of the process to them getting saved is we have them pray this prayer. They say like, God, would you come into my life? And would you forgive me for the things that I've done wrong? And I choose to forgive everyone who's wronged me in my life. Now, on one side of the coin, there's nothing wrong with that prayer. And I often think that it's genuine. I think people really want to do that. But the challenge is that there's levels to forgiveness. And the first level is definitely that choice level, right? That choice where you go, man, this person has wronged me so much, but I'm going to make a decision to forgive you. Okay. How effective is that choice? Like how effective is it to go throughout your life and just live on that choice level? Well, for some people, in certain circumstances, it can be fairly effective. But what happens when you live a life where, man, you were really wronged? You lived a traumatic past. You were molested, you were raped, you were whatever, divorced, left, walked out on. I mean, life is full of crazy abuse. And when we apply forgiveness like a blanket, right? When you just throw it over your whole entire life, what ends up happening is that little boy inside of you who was really wronged and taken advantage of never has an opportunity to have a voice. And I know this may sound weird if you've never heard something like this before, but if my son was beat up really bad, my little boy, if he was beat up really bad by some bullies at school, and he came running to me, you know, he's got a black eye, he's got a broken arm, he's got some bruised ribs, and was like, Dad, I hate those guys. I wouldn't be like, whoa. No, like you just need to forgive them. And he's like, wait, what do you mean? I'd be like, no, son, you've been forgiven of so much. Like, I know those boys just beat you up, but like, you need to get over this. Like that's not anything I would ever do. to my kids. And yet we do that all the time to ourselves, and then wonder why we say things like forgiveness is like an onion. You just have to peel it forever. Like you just have to constantly, like over and over and over again, say, I forgive you. Well, we end up in these places like that because we never actually address what really happened in our lives. Because we're never taught to, right? If you weren't given a process for dealing with pain that's effective, most people do this. Like if I say, what's your process for dealing with pain? They say, I take it to God. I'm like, okay, what's that mean? What is your actual process for dealing with pain? If I have somebody in front of me, if I've got a couple in front of me and I'm counseling them, which this happens a lot, and they're in pain, and I say to them, you know what you need to do? You guys just need to take this to God. I've never had them be like, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of that? That is mind-blowing. That's revelatory. No. And it's not that you don't take stuff to God. It's how. How do you actually take it to God? I was teaching in our school of ministry, which Bethel School of Ministry, which is like a Bible college. And I was teaching the second year students. I was teaching this message to them. And I asked them, like, what do you do with your pain? And a student raises his hands and he says, I nail it to the cross. And I'm like, oh, great. Like, what does that mean? Like, how do you actually nail it to the cross? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, that's exactly the problem, because here's the deal. Like and I'm not saying you don't pray about this stuff. I'm saying this is the problem, is we have so much theory. We have so much theory around these type of topics that we don't actually ever sit down and go, is this working? Is this repeatable? Is this effective? Am I in less pain? Am I in a place of prosperity in the places that were broken and bruised and busted up in my life? Like, I had a crazy past. I went through all this trauma and I worked through this pain and now I'm great. Like, if that's not your story, then your process needs tuning. It needs adjusting. And yet we rarely ever challenge these theories that we're told over and over again that don't really hold a lot of water. Excuse me while I take a drink. So we have this incredible picture of Jesus. Jesus is our model, right, for life. And there's this really incredible process that Jesus goes through when, right before he goes to the cross. Jesus is in the garden. And maybe you guys will remember this. He's in the garden and he knows that he's about to be betrayed. And he knows that he's about to get whipped and beaten, spit on, nails driven through his hands, through his wrists, nails driven through his feet, and him hung on a cross, bones dislocated. And when he's in the garden, he's in like so much agony and distress that it says he's sweating blood. Now, this is pretty crazy, because when you think about Jesus, you don't typically think about Jesus in agony. You think of maybe Jesus in some anger, right? There's some salesmen in the temple. They've turned the temple into a marketplace, and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff in there, prostitution, selling stuff. And Jesus makes a whip, right? He's sitting on the curb, making a whip. And he goes in there and he turns the tables over. And in my mind, he whips a couple dudes. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but I'm like, why would you go through all the effort of making a whip and not go in there and just at least test it out a couple times. So Jesus, like you see this powerful Jesus who is confrontational, in love, and protecting what's important. We see that side, but we rarely ever think of Jesus in agony. But he's human. And so you see him, he's in the garden and he's sweating blood. That's how much agony he's in. And he says something that he's never said before. He says, Father, if there's a way to do this different, if there's a plan B, if there's an audible to this plan, can we do that? And you don't really see a response from God, but it must have been something like this, like, hey, I hear you. Like, I know this is going to be tough, but man, this is it. This is the game plan. We're not deviating from the game plan, Jesus. And you see Jesus completely switch gears, right? It says, for the joy before him, Jesus endured the cross. So something happened like in between where he was and like after he talked to God. Like Jesus, in my mind, this is what I like to do. Because the Bible was written 2,000 years ago, I like to try to put myself in the picture so I could like really get into what was happening. So in my mind, this is what's happening. Jesus is talking to God and he's like, man, I don't want to do this. This is going to be so painful, so incredibly humiliating. And God's like, listen, do you see what sin is going to do to Jason Vallotton? Like, do you see what sin's going to do to Lauren? Do you see what sin is going to, like Jesus, in my mind, again, I'm like, this is how I read the Bible. Like in my mind, Jesus is going through like, okay, I'm going to have to do this. Why am I doing this? And he's thinking about me, and he's thinking about you, and he's thinking about the distortion that comes from being disconnected, from being out of order, from sin. And he realizes that the only way to completely get back his kids is to do this. So Jesus goes to the cross, and in my mind, he's being whipped and he's being beaten and he's thinking about me. Every bruise, every scar, every drop of blood, he knows is an investment into redemption, into humanity's redemption. And then he gets up on the cross and they drive the nails through his ankles, and they drive the nails through his hands, and he's hanging on the cross. And it said that the guards gave him gall. They saw that he was in pain. They saw that he was thirsty, and they tried to give him gall on a sponge. And I don't know if you know this, but gall is a painkiller. Gall's a painkiller. And it said when Jesus tasted the gall that he spit it out. Follow me here. Why did Jesus spit the gall out? Have you ever hung out with somebody that was drunk or high or just intoxicated a little bit? And they could be a friend of yours, but when they're drunk and when they're high, if they start saying things to you like, man, I just really love you. Like, you're my best friend. I'd do anything for you. Like when they're drunk, I don't walk away from those experiences being like, oh man, thank you so much. Like, I just feel so incredibly loved. It's like if you grow up in a home where dad is pissed off all the time, and then when he drinks a lot, he tells you how sorry he is. Like, I'm so sorry, I just lose my temper. You're not like, wow, That was really heartfelt. Like, I forgive you. See, when Jesus went to the cross, he didn't want to give you a drunk, I forgive you. He didn't want to numb all the pain that he was in. He didn't want to give us a numbed out redemption. See, Jesus wanted to be fully present when he took sin, when he took pain, when he took confusion, when he took chaos and stepped in for us, when he placed it upon himself. He wanted to be fully present for that. He's not numbing his pain. He's not looking past it. He's not ignoring it. There's no blanket, just drunk blanket of forgiveness. He took every whip. He took every scar. He took every bruise, every beating. He took it straight on. And you see Jesus, he's hanging on the cross. His muscles are dislocated. He's dehydrated. He's in agony. And he says something that we have never heard him say. He says, Father, why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me? Pretty wild, huh? Like, it's what happens when sin came, right? It created this barrier between Jesus and his Father. And he's just in so much agony. So much pain. And in the end, Jesus says to them, Father, forgive them, says the Father God. Father, forgive them, for they don't even know what they're doing. Okay, like this crazy process. Like, how conscious was Jesus in his pain? How conscious was Jesus in your pain? How conscious was Jesus in the process? Like, so incredibly conscious. So conscious that he didn't numb out. He didn't pretend like it wasn't happening. He didn't be like, hey, Father, thank you for putting me here. He's like, Father, where are you? Where did you go? Why have you left me? He is full on processing his emotions. Because most of us have never been taught what to do with our pain. And we've been taught things like, oh, you just need to forgive, or you need to walk it off, or, you just need to tough it out. We say things like, just give it time, as if somehow time heals. Guys, time doesn't heal. Time makes you forget why you are the way that you are. That's what time does. Time is like a revealer. If you have a seed and you plant it in the ground and you give it time, you'll see what it is. You'll see what happens. If time healed, people in prisons would be the most whole people. You have to actually go through a process. Pain just doesn't go away on its own. And forgiveness isn't effective just because you wish it was, or because you say it 50 times a day. Now, again, is that a good step? It's totally a good step. It's step one. But I want to actually give you guys a real process for dealing with pain. When I was going through my divorce and my wife had left, I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, like so angry. I just had so much anger. And I wanted justice. Like I wanted justice for what had happened to my life. And I was talking to God about that. Like, in a real way, I was like, God, like I want to get her back, not like back into my life. Like I wanted to pay her back. And God said something to me that I had never thought about. He said, there's no justice in a broken life. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? There's no justice in a broken life. He said, what will happen if you punish her? Like, how does it solve the issue? Like, how do you win? How do your kids win? How does she win if you punish her? And I'm like, frick, like, my kids, if they have a mom that's hurting, they're hurting. They're not better off. If she had more kids later on someday, like, her hurting doesn't help anything. Like, it actually didn't fix the problem. And he said, yeah, exactly. Like, justice is getting what Christ paid for. It's redemption. It's wholeness. And so I realized, like, in that moment, okay, like, I also don't get justice by staying bitter. I don't get justice by punishing anybody. I don't get justice by just being angry. That's not the way to, like, solve all the injustice that happened to me or to you or to anybody else. And so I started down this process of having to figure out, like, how do I process through my pain? How do I work through all this stuff in my life? Because when you go through a divorce, every good memory that you had together overnight turns painful. Every good memory. So I was like, I felt trapped with these thousands of painful memories. These memories that were just carried so much weight in them. And I felt really stuck. And I started to do something that I had never done before. I started to journal. And that's where I really learned it's where I learned, like, the 6-step process that I'm going to give you guys. But Matthew 5:4 says this. It says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. What's that mean? Well, if you flip the verse around, right? What's the opposite of a blessing? A curse. Curse are those who don't mourn. If you never allow yourself to mourn, what is mourning? It's literally sitting in your pain. Yes, it's not ignoring it. If you don't mourn, if you don't sit in your pain and look at every painful moment, memory, thought as a gift, you will not be able to unpack it and get to the other side. There is an end to your pain. There is a blessing that comes after walking through it. But how many of us want to sign up to sit in our pain? I remember talking to a bunch of students that were going to our school of ministry. It's like, how many of you want to sit in your pain? Nobody. Pain has a voice. It says, fix me now. Do whatever you have to do to get me out of this. And we do, right? We medicate. We binge watch Netflix, we watch porn, we take drugs, we take alcohol. I mean, we do whatever we have to do on a unconscious level. Think about your life. What areas in your life are you medicating because it's so painful? I mean, loneliness is a pain, right? Being alone inside of your thoughts, being alone inside of yourself, like, we medicate that. Anxiety is pain. Depression is pain. We're medicating all that stuff. And the antidote isn't add more medication or, hey, just go harder, right? Like just go run or go lift more weights. That's just another medication. That's another prison process. Like, we need something that's effective. So I started to journal, and I'm just going to dive into it so I don't make it so super long. But the first step in processing pain is acknowledging the pain. You have to be okay. And I just talked about it for a little bit. You have to be okay with going, I'm hurting. I'm hurting. So what you want to do is admit that you're in pain, and then get into a place where you can actually create space to process. So you can't do this in a room full of people. Go on a walk, or what I like to do is I like to go into my bedroom, turn the lights off, open up my computer, get like a font, a computer font, text font that I like, that was inspiring, because you're going to write out your thoughts. You're going to write out your life. You're going to tell your story, and you want to be inspired in it, even though it's like crazy painful. Like, you want to pour yourself into this process. And then I would turn on music that matched my mood. I know this is going to be highly controversial. So if you start out trying to worship through your pain, and I can talk about that side, like if you just try to worship through your pain instead of actually process through your pain, it's just really ineffective, because again, you're trying to like throw this blanket over what happened to you. You're trying to be like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to look at it. Like, I just want God to deal with all that stuff. I don't want to be conscious of it. And I just want to be, it doesn't work. Now, can God trump you and go back and change anything he wants to in your life? He can. Are there people who got saved and they prayed the prayer, Father, forgive those who have hurt me? I forgive those who hurt me. And literally their heart was changed? He absolutely can. Does that happen all the time? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's super rare. Because God's not afraid of the process. He created the process. He wants us to know a process. And if you don't understand the process of how to do anything, communicate, process pain, like, you're just going to be afraid of it every time you feel it. Okay, enough on that soapbox. So I turn on music that matches my mood. I pick one thought, one memory, one moment, one thing, because you can't process everything. If you try to process everything, if you try to get on 5 or 6 or 7 things, like, I was molested, and I was beaten, and I wasn't wanted. And then when I was 18, this thing, like, you overload the system, and it's like you can't get anything done when you try to get everything done. So what I like to do is, when you have something come up, not when you drum it up, when something comes up and, oh my gosh, it's so incredibly painful, that's your thing. You grab that, hold on to it. If you're not in a place where you could process it right then, just save it. Just be like, ooh, I need to get 45 minutes alone and go back into that memory, back into that thought. Now, here's what you're going to do. This is step 2. You want to journal it out. You want to process it. I like typing. I like telling my story. I've also done it through songs. I've done it through poems. I've done it through sonnets. I've done it in a lot of ways. But for me, the most effective way is I like to tell my story to me. And it doesn't have to, a lot of guys and girls go like, well, how do you start? How do you, like, I don't ever know what to write. That's your first line. Like, I don't know what to write today. But I had the memory of my dad not being there for me. And it was when I was 16. And I never felt more alone than that moment. Okay, great. Like, that's a start, right? That's a start to you unpacking, you pulling it out. Think about it like this, like you're taking the pain, you're opening up this box, and now you're looking at it and you're like studying it. You're telling your story, this incredibly raw, vulnerable, like tender story, painful story of what happened. And as you do that, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have lots of feelings. Sometimes you're going to cry uncontrollably. So I would type and I'm crying so I'd stop and cry, and I'd type, and I'd cry, and I'd type. And as I'm typing out my heart and my feelings and my emotions, and there's anger coming out, and there's a lot of judgment in there. I'm like, how could you? And how dare you? And why did you not? Okay, you have to understand something. Your journal, what you're processing, is not a commentary on your character. It's a commentary on what happened to you. So when my 5-year-old son or my 10-year-old daughter, when they're processing with me about what happened to them, I'm not like, whoa, 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 whoa. You can't say that you're angry. You can't say that you're mad. You can't say, how dare him? Like if someone slapped him in the face, I'm going to hear my son out. I'm going to be like, wow, holy smokes. Oof, buddy. Yeah, I bet you hate them. Oh, I bet you wish they weren't alive. I bet you wish you didn't know them anymore. Now, am I going to leave him there forever? No. But he needs to get it out. If you try to filter yourself, it just puts a cap on everything. So, feel free in the safety and comfort and security of your own privacy to really be honest with what happened and where you're at. You have to. Hey, BraveCo men. I am here to tell you about our BraveCo testimony book, the Father's Edition. This is chock full of incredible testimonies of God coming through for men, for marriages, for finances. And here's why it's important. In Revelations, it says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And that is what happens when you get other people's testimonies as you get their breakthrough. And so I want you to check out this book. If you want something that you can give to your son, you can give to your father, you can give to a friend that will really help them out in life, this book is it. You can go to braveco.org and pick up your copy today. Okay, so you're processing that one thought and you're going to stay on that, right? Here's what happens. When you begin to, you're 10, 15, 20 minutes into crying, into writing, into processing it out. What eventually happens is you get way below this anger, way below this judgment, and you begin to find the real thing that you're angry about, the real thing that you're hurt about, the real thing that you're sad or powerless, or you dive way deeper. When one of the stories I always share is, I remember after my divorce or through my divorce, the first time that I had processed my wedding day, right? Remember, every beautiful, incredible memory now turns to pain. And I remember I used to be a pastor in our Bethel School of Ministry. And the worship was going on. And so I was like on the side of the stage getting ready to close worship. And I had a memory just popped in my mind of my wedding day. And as worship was going, like, I would just begin to cry, like, oh my gosh, I'm watching myself on my wedding day. It's so incredibly painful. And I just quickly laid down behind where the artists are painting and stuff. And as I'm like diving more into this memory, I'm just begin to like sob, like so loud. And then I realized, oh shoot, worship's going to end. And I'm up here like I'm a mess. So I jump up, I run upstairs to my office. I turn off the lights when I get in there, open up my computer, put on sad music, and begin to process. I begin to write out. And at first it's accusations, right? Whatever accusations I had to my ex-wife. Like, how dare you? How could you? I'm all alone. All the things that you would think, like just normal things. And I'm crying and I'm typing and I'm crying and I'm typing. And then all of a sudden, like 15, 20 minutes in, I start saying like, what do I do about my vows? Like, how do I get my innocence back? Like, I gave something away that I can never, ever get back. Who's going to want me? And I realized, oh, that is the underlying issue right here. is I feel like I gave my innocence to somebody and I can never get that back. I gave my vows. Like, how do I keep my vows? I didn't even have a choice in it. Like, I don't have a choice whether or not I keep my vows. Like, I didn't have a choice whether or not my divorce happened or didn't happen. It's that thing is what we need to bring to God. So step 3 is find the theme. As you process, you'll realize, man, once you dive below the anger, below the shame, below the pain, below the accusation, there is the underlying root of what really needs to get dealt with. That is what God wants to talk to you about. The thing that no one else can do for you, the thing that you need Him to actually answer. That's how you take it to God. So I sit there in that moment. And step 4 is to take it to God. I'm literally in that moment. Like, I'm exhausted. I've been crying. I've been typing. I've got all this like emotion. And I'm like, God, what? I literally say this, like, God, what are you going to do? What do I do with my vows? What do I do? And boom, He answers me. Literally meets me in that moment. Now, I don't see Him standing in front of me with my eyes. It like drops in, like I'm listening to God in my mind and in my heart. However that sounds to you, that's what's happening to me. And He gives me an answer. And when He answers me, I'm like, holy cow, this weight lifts off my chest. And I feel like I could breathe. What happened? I was given the answer to this thing that was so painful in my life. And now I have hope. Now I have peace. Now I have a finalization point. And in a moment, everything inside of me has shifted for this one topic, for this one area. Now, step 5 is once my need's been taken care of, I want to find compassion. And here's how we activate forgiveness, real forgiveness. So step 5 is to find compassion because I've already been taken care of, right? That part of me that was angry, that needed justice for what happened to me, that's been satisfied. I gave Him a voice. I found what was really going on. God talked to him. I'm satisfied. Now, I ask God, will you show me how you see her? And that's the next step. Will you show me how you see the person that's wronged me? It's crazy, guys. I'll tell you, like, I did this process so many times for so many of the different memories in my life. And when you get to that step where you're seeing God you're seeing them through God's eyes, it's crazy. And I'm not going to, just for the sake of it's not important what God showed me about my ex-wife, but I'll just tell you, like, I was just so filled with compassion. From that place of compassion, I go back and I read my journal. The places where I had accusation against her, I say, I forgive you. Like, from a place of compassion, I forgive you for whatever. I forgive you for this. I forgive you for that. And I'm not using forgiveness as a blanket. I'm using it so specific. I'm turning over all the things that I actually felt. I'm looking at them and going, I forgive you. See, because compassion activates forgiveness. Like, compassion is this glue that makes the forgiveness actually stick and work. And when you forgive from a place of compassion, it is crazy effective. It is, to me, the deepest level. Compassion is incredible. How many times in the Bible was Jesus on his way somewhere? And it says, like, somebody came up to him and from compassion, it says, like, from compassion, literally says that phrase, from compassion, Jesus performed a miracle. From compassion, Jesus reached out and healed them. From compassion, like, compassion is this incredible activation. It's a catalyst. So for me, I dive into, God, how do you see her? How do you see him? Or how do you see them? And I see him how he sees them. And then boom, I apply forgiveness. This to me is the most, there's other ways to process your pain. This is the simplest, most repeatable way that I've ever found. And I've used it thousands of times for people. I've taught this everywhere that I teach. And I've walked so many people through death and divorce and abuse. And you name it. It's just so completely effective because you have a really comprehensive, easy, way to go, okay, I'm not doing okay. I'm not doing okay. And I want to be okay, but I also need to give value and a way for me to really talk about what's going on inside of myself and a way for me to really forgive even after I talk about it. And so to me, you short circuit in a bad way, the process. When you try to forgive before you share what's going on inside of you, it doesn't work. And I talked about that in the beginning, but now you see why. You need to have genuine compassion. And in order to have real, genuine compassion, oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes, you first need to be heard. You first need to have a voice. You first need to be acknowledged, and that need needs to be taken care of. And let me give you guys a couple ground rules. Here's the thing. You can only process so quickly. You can't process 20 things in 1 week. You can't do that week after week after week. If you're working through a bunch of pain in your life, you can process a couple of times a week. Then you have to eat well, sleep well, exercise, have fun. So you have to recharge. If you're not emotionally recharged, don't go and process a ton. Go and emotionally recharge. I do that through fun. I can do that through fishing, through hiking, through running, through, everyone recharges emotionally different. But to me, I want to have slept well. I want to have eaten well. I want to have rested well. And then I'm ready to dive in. Okay. If you try to process over and over and over and over again, you'll crash. You'll eventually emotionally crash. It's how people have nervous breakdowns. It's how they wear themselves out. It's how they dread these type of seasons. What will eventually happen is you'll eventually get excited about these things that you need to process. This is literally what happened to me. I would look forward, I'd be at work just doing my day, and then I'd be in a painful moment that just happened, and I'd be like, ooh, I can't wait to go home and to dive into this. It was one of the most incredible seasons in my life because I actually got to know me. And I actually showed up for me. It was crazy. It's the weirdest thing. What I realized working through my divorce is no one else could possibly know how I felt. So in a weird way, I felt like I was there for me. And in some ways, I felt like I was there for that guy who was going through it. So, man, there's just so much benefit to really taking time in taking care of yourself. So I want to encourage you this week. If you have some stuff in your life that you've been ignoring, that you've been hiding from, that you've been numbing, pushing away, let's put some of this into action. Let me give you one more rule that I almost forgot is don't go dredge up old stuff. It's a mistake people made. They're like, I think maybe my dad molested me when I was young, but I don't really know. I'm like, man, don't dig up old stuff. If it's already been healed in your life and it's already over with, there's a lot of stuff that God takes care of that you don't ever dive all the way into. There's a lot of stuff that you take care of. You don't even realize there's a lot of stuff that's it just rolled off my back. It literally did. I don't remember everything that happened to me. Every time somebody said a rude word to me or looked at me weird, Don't go and dredge up old stuff. Just take care of the stuff that's really there. Now, it may be stuff that's 20 years old, but it's still current, if that makes sense. It's happening. You're remembering it. It's there. You're present in it. Tackle that stuff. So let's put some of these tools to practice and see how it works for you. But I just want to pray for you real quick. Father, I thank you for each person that's listening to this, that's watching this today, God. I thank you that you are our Redeemer. You're our healer. And God, I ask, Lord, that every person that's carrying just a load of pain, God, that you would gently walk them through this process. Lord, that you would be closer to a brother, more reliable than a best friend. God, that they would dive in and that years of pain, years of torment would literally just be washed away, God. And Father, in this, that true forgiveness, these places where we have been so wronged, where we've been used and abused and neglected, God, that real forgiveness would come into play. And God, that you would release us from anger, from judgment, from brokenness. And Lord, I ask that this would be an incredible season of wholeness and healing for each person. Amen. Guys, have an incredible week. Do the homework. Stay brave. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.